Yo, so with Payday 3 on the horizon, slated to come out in 2023, I thought it would be fun to run through what I want from the game and to speculate a little bit about how the game might work. Payday 3 is a big release for me, and it's a game that everyone's going to be playing for years to come, so I'm really hoping that Overkill can get this one right and make it the definitive heist experience that they keep saying they want to make it. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the tone of the game. Payday 2 had a very unrealistic approach to combat and a very arcadey style with kind of a silly and ridiculous tone. And I hope that they double down on that in Payday 3. I think that that tone is what made Payday 2 good. But I still think there's opportunity for them to insert realism and kind of grit where they can. I think especially that's the case with the story. And how kind of realistic or how dark they want to take the story. Personally, I would love to see a much darker story, a much grittier story. Also, with the stealth missions, I think there's a real opportunity there to change the tone where appropriate and give the player a much more tense experience to really create this realistic experience that, again, is just so much more tense than it is in Payday 2. But ideally, the tone stays quite consistent and they don't end up giving the player tonal whiplash. Okay, so next I want to talk about the core heist experience, and this is really what's going to make Payday 3 for everyone, right? So I think what's very important for Payday 3 is that the heists are expanded to a point where variety is kind of a priority. So I would imagine branching heists with different ways to complete the objective, not just stealth and loud. Maybe the heist goes in between stealth and loud. There's also a consideration for being able to start the heist with a stealth loadout and then being able to complete it even if the heist goes loud. I think more engaging micro objectives as well. So, for example, right now in Payday 2, there's a lot of waiting around and holding the interact key to like wait for objectives to complete. And it's like really not an engaging experience at all. And I think with the move to Unreal Engine, they have a unique opportunity here to make the micro objectives within the heist much more engaging. And to be honest, this is something for me that kind of needs to happen because as much as I love Payday 2, waiting for the drill to finish or waiting for the helicopter to arrive, these are elements of the game that can be challenging and fun, but I think there's too much of them and you need to replace a lot of them with more engaging activities. So I think along the lines of puzzles or something like that. Obviously, the loud heist experience will take care of itself. If the shooting and movement mechanics are satisfying and fun, then that entire experience will take care of itself. We don't need to worry about that. But what I'm interested in is where they go with stealth. Currently, you have 4 pages, and the stealth attempt can fail very quickly if you make a mistake. So I'm curious to see what level of detail and realism will be part of the stealth experience. You know, will pages be a thing? What kind of limits are you going to have in stealth? For me personally, I think that challenge with stealth is important, but I don't necessarily know if the challenge needs to be as arbitrary as you have 4 pages. If you get discovered, that's it. Like, could they take it in a different direction where even if you do make a mistake, you can recover somehow? I think they have a really unique opportunity here, obviously, to change stealth up in meaningful ways so it isn't just black and white. I'm incredibly excited as well to be able to take advantage of the advanced technology that they keep talking about. They have talked about moving Payday to the digital age, I believe, and so I'm excited to see what kind of technology we'll be able to use. Similarly to what I said about the more engaging micro objectives, I think you have to streamline elements of a heist so that the pacing isn't interrupted. So for example, an element like transporting loot right now can be a bit tedious, so I think you can figure out ways to streamline that so that the pacing isn't interrupted and that you can continue progressing through the heist without being halted in any way. And I think pacing is the last point I'll talk about when it comes to the core heist experience. Right now in Payday 2, again, there are a lot of elements that interrupt the pacing of the heist. There are a lot of elements that can be frustrating or boring or tedious. I think for Payday 3, again, with the move to Unreal and the opportunity to build upon what Payday 2 has, you have a real opportunity to perfect that pacing and make it so the heist is just constant action or constant intensity. I think to put elements in that halt that intensity or halt that action would be a bad move for Overkill. But those are the kind of things that I'm hoping for from the core heist experience. Payday 2 obviously does interesting things with pre-planning already, but it's limited to the restraints of the diesel engine. It's limited to the restraints of that time. So ideally in Payday 3, pre-planning can be expanded upon in many different ways. Obviously, all the essentials that are in the Payday 2 pre-planning aspect remain for Payday 3. So you can choose your exit, you can choose what items you want in the heist, you can choose certain ways to help out, like snipers or spotters, etc, etc. But what I'm interested in is how they'll elaborate on it further. So for example, think about maybe an option for players to spawn in different locations depending on their role. This is something that I think would actually be really cool. Now, I think this is dependent on whether or not they want to go for a more role-based heist experience, but I think regardless, having the option to choose, hey, we want to put this player in this position to spot for us for the entire heist is a cool option to have. But obviously there are so many other things you could do with pre-planning. I think it's just down to variety and how many different things you want to give the player access to in terms of how they want to plan their heist. Now I want to talk about progression systems. I'm hoping that for Payday 3 we get progression systems that are similar but deeper versions of the ones we love from Payday 2, like skills, things that are reminiscent of a perk deck, etc, etc. Keeping in mind that when it comes to progression, Payday 3 is meant to be played for years and years to come, so progression that's almost infinite is incredibly important, I think. Obviously, the importance of builds in Payday is paramount, so multiple progression systems that overlap and layer on top of each other to keep the opportunity for builds open, and of course that requires synergy of systems as well, so perk decks need to work with skills like they do in Payday 2, and whatever progression systems they put in Payday 3 need to work with each other to be able to give players options to create builds. There's a lot of ways to earn rewards in Payday 2, so I think in Payday 3 what I'd like to see is a balance between RNG systems and guaranteed systems for rewards like there is in Payday 2. For example, at the end of Payday 2 you get the cards, which is a random reward, and then you get the guaranteed skill points every time you level up. A balance between those two systems is a fine system for me. What I think is also incredibly important and something that I would love to see in Payday 3 off the bat is a streamlining of the process of replayability like in Payday 2. If you want to go Infamous in Payday 2, you can stack up XP and then go Infamous, and then you'll be able to easily spec back into your skills. I think that's something that's necessary for Payday 3, is again a streamlining of that replayability process. Personally, in Payday 3, I'd love to see infinite progression in a different area other than Infamy. I think that being able to have access to my skills that I've earned over my first, say, 40 hours of playtime for the rest of my playtime is incredibly important. I don't like having to go Infamous then respec. I think it just halts progression. So that's something I'd love to see in Payday 3 is once I've earned the skill points, I don't have to earn them again. Obviously, achievements are huge in Payday 2. There's over 1,300 of them, which is just ridiculous, but I hope that's exactly what it's like for Payday 3 as well. There's just something so satisfying about stacking up a bunch of achievements, and a bigger number makes me more motivated to play to get them as well. So yeah, achievements, I think you keep the same structure for them in Payday 3 and just spam them. You can apply progression basically anywhere. Heist mastery levels, weapon levels, character levels, account levels, collectibles, milestones, achievements, and so much more. There's just so much possibility for progression in Payday 2. Or in Payday 3, sorry. So I'm hoping that they nail it and make the progression rewarding and, again, almost infinite. So it's known that for Payday 3, they will be using the Unreal Engine, which is obviously a huge upgrade from the outdated Diesel engine that Payday 2 runs on. For me, where this becomes really important is within the mechanics of the game. So the shooting and the movement mechanics specifically. With a move to Unreal, they have an opportunity to make the feedback of the shooting mechanics incredibly visceral, I suppose, and far more satisfying than they are in Payday 2. I think Payday 2 does it pretty well, but obviously you need to update and modernize those mechanics. Especially with movement. Movement in Payday 2 can feel quite floaty. On the vanilla version, there's tons of fall damage, so upgrading that movement to reflect whatever tone they're going for. Again, if it's arcadey, then make the movement fast and snappy, right? If it's more gritty and realistic, then make the movement slower. So whatever tone they choose to go for Payday 3, I know that by using the Unreal Engine, they'll be able to reflect the mechanics properly for that tone. What Unreal Engine also means for Payday 3 is infinitely more environmental interactivity and reaction. They've already mentioned that New York will be a living world. What I want to know is, will the heists be a very reactive environment when you actually load into them? How interactive is the environment going to be? How realistic are the interactions going to be? How will NPCs react to your actions? How will objects in the environment react to your actions? How can you interact with objects in the environment? Can you knock over a pot plant and have a guard distracted and come over to that pot plant? These are the kinds of things that are possible within Unreal Engine, and these are the kinds of things that I hope they take advantage of for Payday 3. I mentioned this before, but moving to Unreal Engine means that they can get rid of or limit the tedious elements within heists in favor of more engaging objectives or activities. I just think that they'll be able to remove the hold interact key down and instead create a more fun kind of minigame or puzzle or interaction when you're completing objectives. Something that I am genuinely hoping for within Payday 3 is large spectacles, which is possible now with using Unreal. For example, I think Payday is a phenomenal franchise for Hollywood level cinematics and spectacles. And I think Payday 3 is a great opportunity to take advantage of Unreal Engine and create big spectacles. Just think of something like being able to have car chases with the police to successfully escape a heist, or some heist changing event that kind of mimics Levolution in a sense, that can change the way you play the heist. Music is obviously a huge part of Payday 2. It's an iconic soundtrack at this point, and it sucks that we know Simon Viklund won't be returning, at least for the start of Payday 3 is what I'm aware of right now. We're not sure exactly who's going to be composing for Payday 3, but it's likely Gustavo Coutinho, sorry for butchering that name, as he's done more of the recent Payday 2 music. Whoever does it, I think what's most important is they capture the essence of what Payday music is. So there's the different sections in the song, anticipation, assault, etc, etc. But what's most important to me over the sections and over who does it is just that the music goes hard. I'm hoping for a mix of kind of like rock and electronic music. I think those two genres when mixed can create awesome sounds that fit really well within a Payday heist. And of course the stealth tracks need to capture that feeling of creeping around and trying not to get caught, but also building intensity. Payday 2 is one of the few games where the soundtrack is actually louder than the sound effects and the master volume, so here's hoping they can get it right. Now, when it comes to the story, obviously, I'm not super fussed about story in video games all the time. Again, I'll focus on it if I find it entertaining, but it's not a main component of why I enjoy a game to me. But in Payday 3, I'm almost certain that I'll be progressing through elements of the story, if not the story itself, while playing through the heists. So in that sense, I hope that the story is a bit more interactive and less segmented than in Payday 2. If they're going to make me go through it, then I hope that it's at least a competent and enjoyable story. I mentioned this earlier, but I hope that it takes a much more gritty, realistic, and darker tone. I'm curious as to what kind of focus the story will take from the game. Will it be center stage, or will it be guided by heist objectives and kind of play out in the background like Payday 2? Personally, I hope for a good mix where I can interact with the story consciously and progress the story consciously, but then also I can just play through missions and heists without being bombarded by story or lore. I'd love to see some different game modes in Payday 3. There's different game modes in Payday 2, so that's why I'm certain that at some point we'll get something like a horde mode, but what I'm interested to see is maybe a versus mode. I think that would be really cool. I think there's a lot of ways you can do a versus mode in Payday, whether it's some sort of time trial, you trying to sneak past your friends, seeing who can get the most loot. I think all these modes can be implemented into the game somehow, but I understand that this probably isn't on their list of priorities at all and probably won't be for quite some time. But in terms of new game modes, obviously it's a given that we'll get tons of different game modes, but what I'm hoping to see is a versus mode, because I think that'd be really cool. Obviously, I want to be able to play older heists within Payday 3. Obviously, these versions of the heists will be updated versions that fit within the mechanics of Payday 3. I think what's most important for me is if I'm going to be able to play Big Bank, then I want more variety than is currently in Big Bank. If I'm going to be able to play Ukrainian Job, then I want more variety than is currently in the Ukrainian Job. But that's all I'm hoping for the older heists. I want to talk about the hub location setting, semi-open world. It's a phrase that's been thrown around a couple times, I've heard, in relation to Payday 3. Payday 3 takes place in New York, and Overkill have said that New York will be a living city, which hopefully means, and this is what I'm hoping for, that the world is responsive to your actions. For example, I really hope to see security measures that react to whatever your last move was. For example, if you went loud the last time you did this heist, then the security measures reflect that. Same with stealth. I'm not sure if the living city phrase means we'll be able to walk around in some sort of semi-open world or not. I assume that most of heist selection will take place from a menu, which I hope is only for ease of use. I'd love the hub location to have more utilities that we can use in a 3D space. I'm also interested to see what the utility of the hub world will actually be. So I'm just hoping for a really cool hub location with customization options, upgrade options, and obviously real utility. Keep the crazy mask customization, obviously. You can go way more in depth with mask customization in Payday 3, I'm going to imagine. That's what I'm hoping for. And then character customization, obviously, as well. Weapon customization is obviously important too, but that's not a huge thing for me. And the last thing I want to talk about is the DLC model. Now, obviously, we know that Payday is going to be a games as a service model, so that means that they're going to be constantly supporting the game after its launch. Ideally, in a fantasy world, we get bigger DLC bundles with an emphasis on quality and quantity, and obviously a price that reflects that. For example, if we get, 2 heists, a few new weapons, more customization, or maybe a new game mode in a single DLC bundle, make that $30-40, and I think that's an appropriate price. A lot of people are going to have problems with microtransactions, obviously, but as long as they aren't exploitative or give people with spare cash an advantage over people that don't have spare cash, I think I'm okay with them. So I'm mainly talking about cosmetics. If they only have cosmetics as the microtransactions, then that won't impact the quality of the game at all, hopefully. And then obviously what I'm hoping for when it comes to post-launch content is new heists, new weapons, new gadgets, new characters, new game modes, more cosmetics, etc., etc. I think those are all givens. Hopefully they're all quality, and hopefully the price we pay for them reflects the quality of the content we're getting. I just wanted to apologize. My nose was blocked while recording this, and so my voice doesn't sound quite right, and my attenuation doesn't sound quite right either. But I appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you next time.